Hey there, everyone. Jason here. I'm going to double check that we are live on Facebook. Don't want you to miss out on today's guest. She has tons of great information, and it's a very cool take on publishing cookbooks, which is something that I know a lot of us are interested in. People are always asking about the best ways to do that. So it looks like we are set up over there live. So, hey there. I'm Jason Logston, and this is Makin Bacon. We're all about helping you serve your fans, grow your income, and get the most out of your blog. And today's sponsor is my very own Web Stories Made Easy email course. You can check that out at makethatbacon.com/webstories. And we've all heard people excitedly talk about Google Web Stories on social media, in mastermind groups, and on podcasts. But what the heck are web stories, and how are they different from other stories like Instagram and Pinterest stories? And what's the best way to integrate them into your own blog? I did some research on that. I wrote everything up, and I created this course so you can understand how to get the most out of them for your own blog. You can check that out for free at makethatbacon.com/webstories. And remember, you can join us live every Thursday when we record these episodes. You can ask the guest questions, talk to the other bloggers in the comments, and even see our smiling faces. So join us Thursdays at makethatbacon.com/live or search for Makin Bacon on your favorite podcast platform. Now, on to the show. As food bloggers, cookbooks are often on our radars. Many of us explore traditional publishing and self-publishing, but we ignore one path to publishing, getting paid to write a book. Luckily, today's guest is the perfect person to help us out. She is a former Joy of Cooking editor, cookbook author, and cookbook coach. She's also the owner of the Green Apron Company, which specializes in food and nutrition writing and cookbook development. Inside her Get Paid to Get Published program, she helps food and nutrition experts get paid to write cookbooks so they don't have to spend their own money to get published. I can't wait to learn from today's guest, Maggie Green from the Green Apron Company. Maggie, welcome to Makin Bacon. I see your video below. I'm not sure why it's not popping up here. There we go.
Hey, Jason, how are you?
Doing really good. Thank you for joining us for the show today. I'm really excited to dive into all the really cool things that you do. Yes. Before we get started, I always like to ask, what is it like around your dinner table on a typical day?
Well, lately it's been a little different than it has been. I have 3 young adult children. One of them is finishing college and lives at home. So mostly at dinner, it's me and my husband, Warren, and my daughter, Julia. She's 22. And actually, that's kind of fun because we can eat lots of interesting things. We can have some wine. I'll have a glass of wine. And the other fun thing about it is there's usually not any rush to eat or go do anything or have to be anywhere. So I think it's a little bit more relaxed than maybe it was around here 15 years ago.
I could see that.
Yeah.
What's your go-to style of wine?
Oh, we love red wine, but when we have a glass of wine during the week and even on the weekend, I tend to gravitate toward 13 to 13.5% reds. We like red wines from France or Italy or Portugal, not really heavy red wines. I think that tends to go a lot with the foods that I cook. We tend to roast fish or some meats, some vegetables, and maybe have a salad. And it just seems like a nice body wine like that tends to go pretty well with what we have. Although for this weekend, I just bought a piece of prime rib. I think I'm going to cook that for Easter, and bought some ground lamb. And I think we're going to have to get a little bit heavier red wine for that. So we'll do some wine shopping here in the next couple of days.
Very cool. I always like hearing what type of wine people like, because it's all over the place. My wife and I like... we get a lot of our wine from Imagery, which is a winery in Napa, and we just like almost everything they do. And it's really kind of smaller batch, unusual stuff. So we just get random things from them all the time. Yeah. Some people stick to regions, and it's always fun.
We love to try different kinds of red wine. I just have noticed that, if we're consuming them on a regular basis or, daily, a couple times a week, the heavier reds sometimes just don't really fit with the kind of evening that I want to have. So I think that's why we tend to gravitate toward that. Although it's funny, the other day I was shopping for wine. I shop at a store here in Northern Kentucky, right outside of Cincinnati, and they had a 6% red wine, which kind of surprised me. And he said it actually was a little bit bubbly or effervescent. And a lot of people might have it like after dinner with a cheese course or something like that. And that would kind of appeal to me to try that. We are open to trying all those kinds of things because wine, and Warren makes beer. So all of this fermented beverages is just, it's just like an unlimited exploration of different flavors and beverages, and we love it.
A whole world to explore out
there.
It
is, for
I
sure.
also
for
enjoy
sure.
exploring it.
Yes, yes.
So I really want to dive into one of the main things that you talk about these days, which is getting paid to publish. I think that sounds amazing to a lot of people. Can you talk about what that actually means?
Right. So when we think about publishing, I always say there's really three ways you can think about this. You can think about either becoming your own publisher and investing in your own publishing project. You write the book and then you publish it on your own. You also can think about the pay to publish model, where you write the book, but then you pay a publisher to publish your book. Sometimes that's called vanity publishing or assisted self-publishing. The third model is traditional publishing, which is where we create the content as writers and the publisher publishes our book for us, and they pay us in advance. And royalties off the advance, the royalties come in. We can talk about this if we, after the advance has actually earned out. Now, so that means that we're creators of our content, and then the publishing part is fully supported by the publisher, and then we actually get paid. So that's kind of different. A lot of people think they don't want to publish a book because it might be expensive, they don't have enough money, et cetera, et cetera. So I always say that this model of publishing, from a spending perspective, takes the money conversation out of it completely. You don't have to worry about it, because that's what publishers do. Traditional publishers publish our books for us.
And I feel like there's a lot of, as someone that self-publishes a lot and talks to people about self-publishing, a lot of people don't understand that process. And going with what you're talking about with a traditional publisher, they handle all of those publishing aspects itself, and you can focus a lot more on writing the book. And you've done multiple books. That's correct, right?
Correct. I started as being a cookbook reader. I always read cookbooks. I started collecting cookbooks. And my first job in the cookbook writing space, oddly enough, not writing, but in working with an author, was with The Joy of Cooking. Ethan was volunteering at a fundraiser, and I was too, and we randomly got paired together. It was a chef's collaborative event, and we were pairing, they were pairing local chefs with local growers of food for a ticketed event. And because I didn't have a restaurant, I just said, pair me with somebody. I'd be happy to help. I thought I would be going to someone's restaurant, and I ended up getting paired with Ethan. And after we worked together that evening, they approached me about working with them on the next revision of Joy and helping him to develop recipes. Ethan's an excellent cook, but they wanted someone to work with him to do some note-taking and recording of the recipes that he was actually creating for the next edition of Joy. And that's what I did. But then my responsibilities kind of morphed into a few more things, but that's when I really entered the publishing space. And I entered in the traditional space, obviously, because Joy of Cooking has a publisher. Their name is Scribner. They're located in New York. It's an imprint at Simon & Schuster. And the other thing is that I got to see publishing from that perspective, where you really truly have a business called a publisher, and you have people over here, Joy of Cooking Trust, which was led by Ethan. I was working with them, some other people on the trust side, creating the content for the book. And then, of course, the publisher, paying Ethan for that, paying the trust for that. And that's the model for any traditional publishing arrangement. Business, publisher, writers, and authors working with them in collaboration. So that's really how it started with Joy. I ended up being an editor for several other trade cookbooks, and then got approached about writing a cookbook of my own, and have gone on to write 4 of my own, which have all been traditionally published. And that's the space that I find for people like me. I had a business already. I was doing other things. I didn't necessarily want to publish my own cookbook. And truth be told, I really don't like food photography. I'm not interested. And I know that you can self-publish books without photography, but cookbooks with photography can be beautiful books. I did not want to do that. I wasn't interested in the design. So I think you really have to think about the kinds of things you like to do. And if you have a business, what your profit model is, and where you want to make the most profit from, and where you're willing to build an asset in your business and get paid for that asset without it being maybe the larger share of the profit, but just part of the profit that you're making. I have not retired off cookbooks. My husband hasn't retired off cookbooks. I have a business around coaching other people now that want to write cookbooks. But I always say that a traditionally published cookbook fits great in a business model where it's an asset in your business.
I think that's super important with all the different ways of that you can publish a book, and people know that I'm come from a heavily self-published background, and they're always like, well, you must not like traditional publishing. And it's like, well, no, it's for my specific goals and what I was trying to accomplish. This worked great. Like when I did my first self-published book, I didn't have a choice because there was no one was going to publish a sous vide cookbook 12 years ago when the equipment was $1,500 and no one cared about it. Now you can have
that
a traditional
be different,
but in order to get it out there, I had to do it. And so I like what you're saying, that depending on what you're trying to accomplish, the traditional model can really check those boxes for you. And I think it's Sally Eckes that says, a cookbook is the best business card that you can have.
100%.
If you have a business around it, it's going to give you that authority.
Right. Because I think that there's a reason that not everybody has a published book. And that's because, and I think you can attest to this, it takes a lot of self-determination and self-discipline to write a book, whether or not you're self-publishing it or having it traditionally published. You have to be willing to face some negative emotion, face the imposter syndrome, get yourself to study your topic and sit down and write about it. And that is not something that is always easy for everybody to do. But I think that if it's one of the most gratifying things, though, because you really truly see how ideas turn into physical products. And that's what books are. They are people's ideas about a topic turned into something that other people can enjoy and read. And I think print cookbooks fit in kitchens. I think they still do. I think the pandemic has even proven that even more. I think one of the top, genres of book sales was cookbooks. And I think that you and I both in this space of creating books that can help people have fun in the kitchen, heal, learn some new things, maybe learn about the story of a culture or the story of a cuisine is just I think cookbooks are fun. It's a really fun way to get your name out there and to explore the world of food writing. So I think it's important, though, that people make some decisions before they even dive into it, though, like what their goals for this book really are, why they want to do it. You hear that all the time. People like, tell us, you have to think about your why, but it's really true. And once you can answer some basic questions behind this, do you want to be your own publisher or not, is really probably the most basic question you can ask yourself. And if you say no, then know that this traditional space is available. And if you say yes, know the self-publishing space is certainly available also. Both really viable ways to get your books produced.
I like your point about having kind of that external motivation in some cases, that it's
Don't
a long process. Don't you think
it's true? Right, it is. It is. And people say it's so hard, I can't do it, it's hard. And I say, well, it's not that it's hard. I think it's just that it's new. It's completely new. And when you're doing something for the first time, the only way you learn how to do it is just literally to do it. Do you agree with that? Or, I think that, like, how do you, I'm going to tell them what I did, but in order for someone to really write a book and get it published, they have to write the book and get it published to fully understand what it takes. Talk to people all day long about it, but they have to be willing to sit down and take the steps and do the work of it in order for it to happen.
That's one thing I talk about a lot is stop learning. That at some point, learning more is procrastination. And
it is.
I had a good email exchange with someone that was new to my community that's trying to find their niche and not sure what their name should be and what they should focus on. And I said, that doesn't matter. Like, get started. And in 6 months, you're going to have a lot better feel for what your niche should be, what your name is. Like, once you've created this content and done it, just hypothetically thinking about things, you can't really understand until you're like, okay, I've worked on this book for 6 months, and now I kind of get where I am. Stupid recipe, like
yes. No, you do get it, and I think that the doing of anything helps that to become clear. And here's the good news: the internet, and even meeting you, Jason, and getting to know you more through online connections is vast, and it's huge, and it's big, and it's abundant, and there's a ton of people. That's the best. That's the great news. The other thing is you can't break anything. It's not like something's going to get broken. Now, you have to be willing to maybe not do things perfectly. If you're someone that struggles with perfection and not getting started unless it's perfect, that is something that often holds people back the most because they're afraid of the kind of reaction that people are going to have if things aren't quote unquote perfect.
Yep.
But, even in the traditional publishing space, I have an editor.
Yeah.
Not only the person that acquires my title and says, yes, we want to extend you a contract, but when I turn my manuscript in, they pay for an editor. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
even if it is perfect for you, it's not going to be
It's
perfect
not
for that
perfect for
editor.
them, and their goal is to help make it better. And I always think editors are my friends. They're trying to make me look better on paper.
Yeah,
Right.
your goal is to put out a good quality product. And
exactly,
that's
because
what
it's a
they're trying to do.
reflection on them as well. They want to be a publishing house that puts out quality books. They sign people that are going to produce a good book, and then they work with editors that are going to help them create that good book, and then a nice designer, photographer, illustrator, however they, get the book, livened up with the design and the way it looks, and then a nice printer. They, a lot of printers or publishers are very particular about the paper they use, the way the book is bound. Do they use a dust jacket? Is it soft cover, hard cover? What the casing is like? Does it lay open? All these things that go into publishing. But the beautiful thing about that for me is I didn't have to worry about any of that. No, I didn't have to make any of those decisions. But some people they don't want to traditionally publish because they don't want to lose control.
Mm-hmm.
They want to have control over every decision in the publishing process. And I got to have a lot of input. I did not get to have the final decision on everything because as a business, a publisher knows, like the marketing department will know what's going to sell. Maybe the color of the book, the shape and size of the book, the title of the book, what's really moving when it comes to cookbooks. And I thought I'm the kind of person though, I was like, well, if that's what their expertise is, I'm happy to be associated with that and I can give my input, but I really have to trust that they know what they're doing.
One thing a lot of people ask is when is the right time to start approaching doing a cookbook? When do you have enough followers or enough knowledge? Like when should you be like, okay, I've been blogging for this amount of time or I have this amount of reach. Now I'm ready to finally approach it. When is a good point for that?
Right. If you're a person that is in a situation like you just described, Jason, where you feel like you have started to, build your platform, which means kind of like building your audience, you're connecting with people, you're communicating on a regular basis, you have a good feel for what your audience wants and needs and what they're responding to. You don't have to wait to pitch. Pitching is free. Pitching a publisher doesn't cost anything, and you don't have to write your entire manuscript is really the best news. You have to write something called a cookbook proposal. It's kind of similar to writing a business plan for a book, but you let them know who you are, what you're writing about, how you're going to help promote the book, maybe some competitive titles that are similar to your book, and you can pitch it. But sometimes what happens to people when they start to get into this space and they start thinking about it and putting themselves out there, you might just meet someone who works for a publisher because they are everywhere. Yeah. So and even at conferences and things, agents come, editors come, publishers come. They're interested in finding people to write books for them.
I think that's a good point about networking and getting out there is key. Yeah. Like I know several literary agents that are like, if I haven't heard of you, I'm probably not going to publish your book because if you're in my niche, someone that I know enough people, someone should have said like, oh, have you met so-and-so?
Right.
Like, and if they haven't got the introduction, they're like, yeah, I probably won't give it as much look as I would as someone else's. And so getting out there and connecting with people in your niche is key.
Yeah.
How does that process work? So you say, I want to do a cookbook. You started with the proposal you were talking about. What goes into the proposal?
So the proposal is a document. Used to be proposals were sent by snail mail, kind of like the way a resume was sent, but now everything is mostly done online. The proposal is a tool and it summarizes three main things: who you are as the author, who your audience is, and what your concept for your book is. Because really what a publisher is buying is those three things. They're buying an author that's willing to help them promote, they're buying the readership that you've already created, and they're buying your idea. And remember, ideas come and go. Ideas get recirculated. Ideas get written about over and over again. There's really nothing new in food. So I always tell people, don't always hang your hat on having the most unique idea because you probably don't. And if there's other books written about it, you can find competitive books or, books that are similar to what you want to write. That's good because it shows that there's a market for it, that another publisher thought this was a topic that people were interested in. So what does that leave if it's not the most unique, awesome idea in the world that no one else has written about? It leaves you and it leaves your readership. Now, I will say that in talking to agents and editors, they are interested in your take on an idea. And if you have a good idea and you need to build your platform or your audience a little bit more, they'll tell you that openly if they like your idea and they like who you are and they see the potential in you as the writer of the book. Sometimes people will pitch to an agent or an editor and they won't hear back. And that's part of the game of pitching, if you're willing to play that game. If you don't like not hearing back from people when you reach out, then this might not be a game you want to play. But I want to ask everybody a question. How many times has someone left you a voicemail or sent you a text that you haven't responded to? And not that's necessarily even like intentional. It might just be like accidental. I mean, if we have a lot of email, text messages, things coming and going. So, follow up if you haven't heard back. People are like, well, I don't want to bother them. I'm like, look, it's okay to ask the second time if they've received it or whatever. So the pitching of it, which is actually getting this proposal in front of them, is important. If you know other authors, if you know an agent, if you know someone who's connected to an agent, always leverage your relationships with other people. For example, if someone came to me and said, hey, Maggie, I see you've written 2 books about Kentucky cooking, Kentucky cuisine. I'm thinking about doing something similar. Where were you published? I would tell them. Who was your agent or editor? I would tell them. What do you think about the publisher? I would tell them. Would you be interested in maybe providing me with an email address? Yes, I'd be happy to, because that's the way we are as writers and authors, because we want also to have these publishers busy in producing books, because the longer my publishers are in business producing good books, the more my books are going to be in print and have a robust marketing, team that's out there still even promoting some, because they're called backlist at a certain point. But my first book is still in print. As a matter of fact, this is not a lie. I got a royalty check the other day and my husband said, the book's 10 years old, but they told me as long as it is selling and it will stay, they keep them in print. That's the way this particular publisher was. They really try to create a list of things that have legs, so to speak, that kind of stand the test of time. And so, that's getting paid to get published when you still get a royalty check, which means I earned out my advance and I'm getting money now over and above that. So that's good.
Let's dive into that a little bit. So you sent out your 50 proposals and you heard back from like 3
so actually,
places, and then one of them signed up.
I tell people narrow it down to 3 really dream publishers that you might have. People are like, well, how do I find publishers? I said, you go to a cookbook section at a bookstore and look at all the publishers that are publishing books. You need to do a little bit of research about that, though, and you need to find out, first of all, if they'll accept a proposal directly from you or if you have to have an agent. And you can tell that by looking at a publisher's website. If you can submit directly to them, then I always recommend sending a couple out if you want to. Sometimes people don't want you to simultaneously submit, which means that if you're an agent, Jason, and I send to you, or if you're an editor and I send to you, one of your guidelines might be, please give me the opportunity to look at this without submitting simultaneously to someone else. So if I'm going to send to Jason, I need to know that that's what he requests. And I either abide by that or I just don't submit to him because I don't want to follow that rule. So I very rarely have my students blast out like 50 proposals at a time. It's more of a methodical, thinking about, does your book fit here? Do they publish the kind of book that you want to publish? My Kentucky book, there were probably a limited number of publishers that would publish about that topic anyway, but I feel like I had one of the best ones and they really were good at promoting the book and it was a beautiful spot for my book to be. So I really want people to align with their publisher also, because if you're excited about who's going to publish your book and you can see your book on their list with all those other books, that produces an emotional response that is motivating. For sure.
And there's a wide range of quality of professionally published books
Yes.
that are out there. And if you pick up some off the bookshelf that have mediocre photos, that have, that just aren't the type of book that you'd be proud to have out there.
Don't submit to them. No, that's right. That's right. So I think that's important to consider. So once you submit, you have to wait and give them time to look through it, to read it. Know that they are probably on a 1.5 year cycle at least from the time they actually extend you a contract to when the book might be published. Some publishers are on a really short. There's a couple publishers now that are paying food bloggers and food and nutrition experts like a flat fee to write a book for them. And that model is okay. That's not exactly what I'm talking about because there are no royalties involved with that. It's kind of like a pay to play situation. So you get a lump sum of money, but there's no motivation for the publisher to continue to print more copies of the book since there's not a royalty model attached to that. No. So give them some time to read your proposal and give them some time to respond. Sometimes they'll tell you how long it might take. If you haven't heard back in the time that they said, don't hesitate to reach out to them again. But I promise you, if you send something to a publisher that makes them have an emotional response to what you have written, either this is horrible or this is beautiful, you will hear back from them.
Yes. So you hear back from one of your dream publishers, they say yes, and they make you a proposal. Can you talk about some of the main components of the proposal? We've been talking about royalties a lot, but that's only one, facet of what goes into it.
Yeah, so they'll extend a contract and they'll give you like a guideline of how long the manuscript would be, how many recipes it might contain in the cookbook. If it's a nonfiction or a health book, it might not have recipes, but usually give you a word count. They'll give you a deadline. They'll tell you things like what % you'll get off of print copies, what % you'll get off ebook copies. They'll also tell you what rights you're signing away, which is all negotiable. Like, is this just first rights for English versions? What if they want to do another language? What happens after that? What about all the other rights for audiobooks and things that can happen to intellectual property that's more than just print? The other thing that happens a lot with cookbooks that we need to think about when it comes to contracts is the index. Often the publisher will ask the author to produce the index or to pay to have the index produced. I did that with my first book, and then I didn't have an agent, but I learned that was negotiable. So I was able the next few times to negotiate that back to the publisher. The thing to remember about an index, though, in a cookbook, especially a cookbook that has a lot of recipes, is that it is a very important tool in that book. So, if you want to spend the money to have someone produce a really good index, especially if you have, 150, 200, 250 recipes, just make sure that your index is serving your book well. Ethan Becker always said, and probably would still say today if I was talking to him, you could have the meaning of life in a cookbook, but if you can't find it in the index, people can't find it. The index is the tool where people typically turn. They may glance through your table of contents and thumb through the chapters, but if they're looking for something specific when it comes to a recipe or an ingredient you might have, say you want to have almonds and you want to make a cake, they're going to go look for cake and almonds and see what they can come up with in your index. So the index is something.
I will say my first 2 or 3 books did not have an index, and I was tried using one of them, and I was like, this is ridiculous. And so the next 10 or 12 all had indexes. As much as I hated putting them together, I was like, I am not going to skimp on this because it's so important for getting any use out of them. It's
huge. And there are people that are in the culinary writing world, and that is what they do, is they do culinary indexes. And, for a big book like Joy, you can imagine it took an indexer that knew cookbooks and knew ingredients, because you think about the way that a recipe is even indexed. It might be indexed by the title, by the main ingredients, maybe by a style of cooking, or if it's roasting, they might have all the roasting recipes together. So there's a lot to think about when it comes to cookbook indexes. So all these things are negotiated in the contract. Some cookbook authors negotiate their own, or they have an attorney help them do it. This is the benefit of an agent, though. If you want to work with an agent, they can help you negotiate your contract. You don't pay an agent up front. You pay them a percentage of the money you earn off the book. Mm-hmm. Typically, 15% is about the going rate for agents. So if you get paid in advance, let's just say of $100, you get $85 and your agent gets $15. Okay. And that's the way the money is split. And most of the time it flows through the agent though. And that the agent will just keep their $15 back and then they'll send the $850 to you. So the publisher really does the financial transactions with the agent. And then you sign the contract. Once you sign the contract, you'll be assigned a managing editor at your publisher for you to reach out to if you have questions, if you're having any trouble, if you think you're not going to meet the deadline, or if you have an agent, they'll do that communication for you. But I think it's really important to establish yourself as part of the team at that point. Do everything you can within your power to meet your deadlines. I do know people who have signed contracts but never submit a manuscript. And that is hard for me to believe, but it does happen. And I don't know why it happens if people go to the trouble of creating a proposal and getting extended a contract, but I think that it's really just boils down to what we were talking about before. You know, the creation of a cookbook manuscript is not something we all do all the time. It takes you being a different kind of disciplined person in order to get this manuscript created, but you only have to do it once. And then it's almost like you have this little course or cooking course or this information contained in this book that you can use to, you know, to connect with people all over the place. If you can just get the, you know, self-discipline is really what it is. I think it's three things. I think it's focus and self-discipline, and then, you know, upping your productivity a little bit if you need to get other things done. And, you know, cooking and writing cookbooks involve both of those things. Yeah.
I like your self-discipline because it is, like you said earlier, it's not hard to write a cookbook. You just need to do a small part for 6 to 12 months every day or every other day, and you can do it. It's like walking a marathon. Like, it's easy to do that if you spread it out long enough. Right. It's just you have to keep doing it and keep at it even when you don't feel like it. And
give yourself some time, you know, plan it out. If you're doing, you know, 100 recipes or 150 recipes, you know, I think, let's say you have 10 months, you know, and you want to give yourself a month or so at the end to kind of look things over. You really have about 9 months to do that work. And then you have to I just usually create kind of a production schedule for myself. And I usually load the front end of the project a little heavier so that I have some time on the end for things I don't anticipate. But if my calendar says it's Wednesday at 10 o'clock and I have an appointment with myself to work on X chapter or create X number of recipes for the book, in order to, if I do everything I plan, I'll meet my deadline. If I start saying, oh, I don't feel like it, or I've got other things to do, or I wish I didn't have to do this today, I'll do it tomorrow, and I start delaying, that's when things kind of would get off track for me. And it's not that things didn't come up, things happen, emergencies happen, but by and large, I was always able to take that big project and just break it down into smaller steps that I could put on my calendar. And I knew if I did everything on my calendar, I would meet the deadline.
Yep. And like you said, you can build some slack into there to know that here's my 5 sick days and I could use it when I need. But
because I don't know, Jason, if you're anything like me, but I'm in my kitchen every day anyway.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm in my office right now. And that's
and I'm in my office now too, but my kitchen is the other place where I spend the most time. If it's not here at my desk with my laptop and talking to people like you or teaching or writing, I'm in my kitchen. Yep. And if I'm not doing that in the evening, I might watch a little television. I've been doing some crocheting lately, or I'm asleep. Seriously, that is the truth. But so if we're people like bloggers, food and nutrition experts, cooks, that are cooking all the time, you've got that's kind of like our laboratory. You've got that time already in your kitchen, and start keeping track of what you're cooking, taking notes, writing things down. That's part of the process too of doing the proposal, just really trying to get a cadence for what you do, because you can teach people so many things, because some people don't even have a clue about how to even start. Like if, say, it's sous vide, or they want to learn how to roast whole pieces of fish on a sheet pan. I mean, you just have to start like creating this momentum where you have a system for doing it, and you can teach people, put it in a book, and get it published. Now, publishers do look for different topics. They're looking for things that are selling, and so it's kind of a matter of sending them a topic that So let's say if you were to submit a proposal 100 different ways to flavor mayonnaise right now to a publisher, I don't know if they would take the bait or not. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. It really depends on what's going on at the time.
If you could emotionally connect them to people staying at home through the pandemic and needing to,
about mayonnaise, though, that's like a huge topic. And it's one of the mother sauces, really, when you think about cold sauces from French cooking. And I bet every cuisine has some sort of mayonnaise, oil egg emulsion that you turn into a sauce. Different ways to use it, and I laugh about that. But she was on my podcast a couple months ago, and she wrote the Duke Mayonnaise cookbook, all about Duke mayonnaise and the history of Duke mayonnaise, and then all the recipes using Duke mayonnaise, everything from savory dishes to cakes. So no topic when it comes to food is really off limits. And that's the best thing about it, because there's tons and tons and tons of material. That's the hard part, though. You have to decide, right? I think you've said that sometimes your people have a hard time deciding. Buckling down and choosing one, it's like picking your favorite child, right? It's like, I can't do that. It's like, well, for a book, you kind of have to decide like what you're going to write about.
Yeah, I picture picking a book topic is kind of like picking where I want to go to on my birthday. We always go somewhere nice and fancy.
Yeah.
And it's not the only time we're going to go out to a nice dinner. It's just I'm going to have to wait a year to go to the next place. So I'm going to put more thought into it, but it's not like it's the only one I can go to. So pick, and then you can pick another one next year.
Take action on it. That's correct. Take action on it, and know that, and you can, and then pay attention to what appeals to you during that time. What else might be calling out to you? Keep track of that, because those kinds of things are important. But just because you're writing about one topic now does not mean you can't do something in the future. That is for sure. And I always tell my students, publishers do not write their own books. They're looking for people to write their own books. And that's why people will have someone walk up to them and say, have you ever thought about writing a cookbook? Or they'll reach out on email. Hey, I saw what you're doing over there on your blog, or I love the content you're creating over here. Have you ever thought about writing a cookbook? That's how people are getting noticed, and publishers are reaching out. So be that kind of person. I always kind of throw that challenge out there. I think that it's totally possible to be that kind of person. Make a little bit of noise, shake some trees in your area. And I think after the pandemic is over and we can get out and do more, even grassroots and offline connections too, don't forget about those as well. Not everything prior to the pandemic was online. A lot of it was offline, and that's really where you can meet people face to face. But thank goodness we've had this online opportunity during this time, because we can still connect and talk to people.
Mike says in the comments that he would take me to McDonald's for my birthday. I appreciate that, Mike.
You have to wait a year to go to McDonald's.
Yeah, right. Now I would take that. That sounds exciting, being out there.
Yep.
He's my co-founder at the International Sous Vide Association,
oh, nice.
And there's a non-zero chance he would do a mayonnaise and aioli book, because he's working on a burger cookbook right now, a sous vide burger cookbook, and he's always loves his flavored aiolis and mayonnaise.
That's right. That's right. And those sauces, I think about sriracha mayonnaise, all the different kinds of spicy mayonnaises. There's white barbecue sauce, popular in the South, which is a mayonnaise-based barbecue sauce. I mean, it's just, goes on and on. So I think it's a great idea. I hope you get published. Yep.
Yeah, I know he's in the middle of it, and he says it's a good point. Just keep working, moving forward. That he picked the topic for his first one, and other topics keep trying to pull him away from it. And I think
the more we cook and spend time in our kitchen, topics are always coming up, and we're always thinking of new ideas. But if you've chosen your first topic and you're actively working on creating a proposal or a manuscript for that, just, I'm a big believer in a notebook and a pen or some way to document these ideas, keeping track of things, and write it all down. And the second one might become apparent even as you're working on this first one. Maybe it's a follow-up book or another twist that you can take, another way of doing things. I always think if this is going to help people to have fun in the kitchen or learn in the food and nutrition space, if it's going to help people heal or feel better, there's the benefit to the reader is huge. And there's always new cooks, always new people wanting to learn things, new people getting apartments, new people getting married. As people age, they have different needs. I'm going to interview someone on my podcast in a couple of weeks that wrote a cookbook for one, single serving cookbook. And, you hear about that a lot with our aging population. Maybe they've raised a family and now they're a widow or a widower, and they like to cook, but they don't like huge portions. So I'm excited to talk to them about the development of that book.
Being a New Yorker, there's tons of people that I know that are single and would kill for a good cookbook that would give them single servings with maybe some leftovers.
And I think that I really am excited to talk to them about it, because I think that it's something that we often overlook. Because food is a community event a lot of times, or we're eating with people, like, even in our household right now, 3 for dinner, or we're going to a potluck, maybe outside of the pandemic, cooking larger portions. Easter's coming up. Maybe people are baking a big ham, but this week, day to day, week in, week out, weeknight eating alone is probably more common than we realize.
Well, Maggie, I appreciate you coming on, sharing your expertise about getting paid to publish and following that model. You recently had me on your podcast, the Cookbook Love podcast, which is great. I recommend people checking out. If any of you listening happen to like cookbooks, you should go listen to Maggie's podcast. It is great, and it dives all into basically celebrating cookbooks in all of their many facets.
Right. I like to celebrate the readers of cookbooks. We talk about cookbook clubs. We talk about cookbook writing, and we talk about cookbook publishing. So it does celebrate everything. So it's not just about authors and the books they've written, although that's part of it. I really think the readers needed a space too to get some due, because if we didn't have people reading our books and buying our books, we wouldn't have the transactions that take place around cookbooks. So the whole audience building piece and the recognition of them as the people who are really supporting the work that we do, I thought was really important. And it's been really fun to meet people. I'm going to talk to a woman next month also that collects Junior League cookbooks, which is a kind of subset of a collection all on its own. I can't wait to hear about that. And so I've always got a lot of fun interviews coming up. And when people love cookbooks, you know it when you meet them, because it's just like you have a lot of things to talk about. It's fun when you go to book signings and people come to the cookbook aisle. They're like, I don't need to buy another cookbook. My wife or husband's going to kill me. I'm buying another cookbook. But I just think it's a genre of book that when people love it, they really love it.
Definitely. And people can find you on Instagram at Green Apron. And for those of you that really want to dive into learning more about this whole process, you can go to Maggie's course at cookbookwritersacademy.com/free. She has a free training and offers a lot more consulting and knowledge for people that really want to dive into it. And check your inboxes as well. Those of you that are in my newsletter, we have an exciting announcement of a little training that Maggie is going to be putting on for my audience as well, which should be very exciting.
Yeah, that'll be coming up on April the 20th. So we're looking forward to that as well.
Well, thank you for coming on, Maggie. And thanks to everyone in the comments for listening. Remember, you can join us live every Thursday when we record these episodes, ask the guest questions, talk to other cooks in the comments, and even see our smiling faces. So join us Thursdays at makethatbacon.com/live, or search for Makin Bacon on your favorite podcast platform. This has been Makin Bacon. We're all about helping you serve your fans, grow your income, and get the most out of your blog. Until next time, I'm Jason Logston. See you all next Thursday.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Jake.